My name is Vishavjit Singh. And before I introduce myself, I want to quickly say welcome to Sikh Coalition's Kid Corner. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you who are joining for the first time, the Sikh Coalition Kids Corner is a weekly virtual learning experience at the same time every Wednesday. Okay, so same time next Wednesday. Make sure you add it to your calendars and join us here every week. So there's been a few in the past few weeks. I'm here today, and there's going to be a really cool artist who I'll talk about towards the end of this session, so you can mark that on your calendars. All right, so as I said, my name is Vishavjit Singh. I am coming to you from New York City. I am at home, like many of us. I'm sitting in my library, which my wife designed for me. I love books. I love reading books, all kinds of different books. So I felt, well, that's the room where I should be while I have this session. All right, so some of you know who I am, some of you might not know who I am, which is totally okay. And one of the things that I want to talk about today, which might be obvious to you because I'm dressed up as Captain America, which is an American superhero. You see my shield in the background. I want to talk a little bit about superheroes today, okay? And so I'm going to actually pose a few questions. So what I'm going to encourage all of you to do is respond to these questions on the chat, and then I'll try to read some of those responses as we go on. So the first question I have for you is, what comes to mind when you think of superheroes? And there's going to be a little delay here. So I know there's about a 10-15 second delay. So bear with me while I respond to your responses. But I'm just curious to hear what comes to mind when you hear the word superheroes. Okay, somebody said capes. Okay, that's quite an obvious one. What else comes to mind? Superman. Okay, yeah. Okay, I get that a lot in my sessions when I do these live in person. What else comes to mind when you think of superheroes? Save the world. Okay, yeah, that's a good one. That's quite an obvious one. Superpowers. Okay, their superpowers. Save the day. Yeah. Okay. Powerful. Powers and fighting for justice. Very cool. Saving people, okay. Okay, so somebody said, a young person said Waheguru, which to those of you who might not know what Waheguru is, I describe it as a force, like from Star Wars. It's like this energy that's present all over the universe. Somebody said Spider-Man, saving people. Okay, so keep those responses coming in. Protectors. So why do I ask this question? And actually, your responses are pretty cool because a lot of times when I go to schools, when I go to live audiences, a lot of times people will say when they think of superheroes, they will say Spider-Man, Superman, Captain America, and they do talk about saving people. But a lot of times people talk about comic superheroes, right? And that's good. That's how we know a lot of superheroes. And a lot of superheroes, usually, they save people, they're powerful. But I wanna focus a little bit about real life. So give me examples of superheroes from real life. So we'll leave comic superheroes aside. What superheroes come to mind when you think of real life people? So we're gonna have a little delay here before I start sharing this with you. My mother, somebody said, okay, that's really cool. That's good. Okay, cool. So I still see some responses coming from Comic World, Captain Marvel. So what are some real life superheroes that you can name? So I see some responses coming in. My dad. So we've had two responses. My mother, my dad. Very cool. What else? My sisters. Okay. My Pagu, which is a historical figure from Sikh history. Yep. Police. Okay. Yes. Doctors. So yes, we're hearing that a lot these days, right? What else? My dad, somebody else. Okay, so that's good. What happened is, we're living in very exceptional time right now where I think we are becoming very hyper aware of some people who are firefighters, somebody said. So going back to my comments, I think we're living at a time we're all home. We know there's this virus that's out and about, and there are some people who are really doing some heroic things, right? Doctors, nurses, people who work in grocery stores, farmers, people who serve food, policemen, police persons, fire department officials, right? Because they work every day. They don't stay home. I'm staying home, but they are working out there, taking all the precautions. So they're superheroes, right? So that's good, and I want you to keep that in mind. And then, very importantly, our parents can be our superheroes. Our grandparents can be superheroes. It could be anyone. So so first responders. Somebody said Guru Gobind Singh, which is the 10th master of the Sikh faith. Nurses, doctors, sevadars, volunteers, which is great. I haven't, and maybe you're trying to be humble. I haven't seen anybody say, you know what, I think I have a little superhero inside me. So, which is good, which is okay. But I do want you to keep this in mind, that most of these people we're saying they're superheroes. They might be superheroes sometimes, but not all the time. Meaning they also need to rest. They go home. There are days when they don't feel very good. There are days when they're like, look, I need rest. I need to be alone. I need to do my own thing. I don't want to be a superhero for today. And that is totally okay. The key to recognize is this: we all have a superhero inside us, and we need to figure out a way of how we channel that superhero, right? How we use that superhero sometimes when we go out to do good things. So all of us have the potential to be superheroes. So keep that in mind, okay? So my next question for you, and now I'm going to make it kind of a little personal, right? So I'm going to pose two questions, and I want to make sure that you write down the response to these questions on a piece of paper. So any size of paper works. I have an 8.5 by 11. You can write on one side, back side, you can say 1 and 2. I'm going to pose two questions to you. We'll write some responses. And then what we'll do is we're going to then go into interactive part of the workshop where you're going to draw and sketch, but you're going to use some of these responses to my questions into your art. Okay? So I'm going to give a couple of minutes to everybody. Make sure you have your pieces of paper. And what you'll need is to write your responses to my questions. You can use anything: pencil, paper, pen. But for the sketching part, I want to make sure you have red and blue pen, markers, or pencils or crayons. But make sure you have red and blue ready. All right? Okay. So let's do this. I'm going to pose my next question to you. So something to keep in mind for superheroes. This is true of superheroes in comic books. This is true of superheroes in real life. This is true of doctors. This is true of nurses, police people, fire department officials, people who work in the farm to produce food for us. All superheroes have two things that you and I also have. So I'm going to start with the first, which might sound negative to you, but we all have it, and then I'm going to pose the second one. So the first question I have, which I want you to write down, and I'll share some of mine with you too. What are some things that scare you, or maybe it's a fear, something that gives you anxiety? So write down those things on a piece of paper. And while you do that, I'll actually share some of mine with you. Okay? And then if you don't mind, as you write down, maybe have your mom and dad or your sister or uncle, aunt, somebody who's with you, have them share some of these responses with me so I can read them out loud. Okay? So the question again is, what are some things that you fear, maybe you don't like, maybe they cause anxiety, you consider them maybe your weakness? So go ahead and write them down. I'll read some to you as people start sharing them. In the meantime, let me do this. Let me share some of my fears with you. Okay? Okay, so somebody said the dark. Okay, darkness. That's I've had that sometimes in my life. So one of my fears, so fears change over time. When I was a young boy, what I didn't like sometimes is I was a very shy boy. I still am very shy, although I might not appear to be. Somebody said bugs. Another person said darkness. Somebody said exams. Yep, I had that fear when I was growing up, when I was in school, in college and in school. Somebody said bees. Somebody said shootings. So here are some of my fears. I got bullied. I got people who used to be very mean to me, people who were not nice to me. So to me, that was my fear, that somehow there is something wrong with me because people would say something bad to me. And I thought that is true, that just because they're saying it, right? So people saying mean things to you, people calling you names. So that became a fear for a long time. I don't have that anymore, but it took me almost 20, 30 years to get rid of that fear. Somebody said going on stage. I had that fear for a long time. It took me a lot of practice to overcome the fear of being in front of dozens of people, hundreds of people. I do that now, but I didn't, when I was young, when I was a teenager, young adult, I didn't know how to do that. Somebody said socializing, meaning how do you interact with people? So I have that too. Even now, if you put me in a room with a lot of strangers, I'm not going to go introduce myself. I'm not going to say, hey, my name is Vishavjit Singh. I'm from New York City. What's your name? Where are you from? I'm really shy. I'm going to stay quiet. I wait for people to come to me. And so that's a fear of strangers, right? I don't want to introduce myself. I'm shy. Somebody said fear of heights. I don't have fear of heights, but I do have fear of somebody had mentioned snakes, and I hate to say it, I have fear of snakes as well. Somebody mentioned being alone. I have that fear as well. So one thing I want you to keep in mind, and thank you, by the way, for sharing, because this is not easy to share. If somebody were to just randomly ask you, here, tell me what your fears and anxieties are, it's not easy to do. Somebody else just mentioned getting sick, so that's one of my fears too. I'm healthy right now, but I don't want to get sick, right? I don't want to get something that's going to make me go to the hospital maybe not being able to work for some time. Somebody said coronavirus. So that's a virus that is out there, which is making a lot of us, including myself and all of you, stay at home. And that is a good fear to have. I mean, fear is not something we should necessarily run away from. I want you to keep this in mind. We all have fears, okay? Every single human being, every doctor, police person, fire department official, every superhero has fears. I have fears, you have fears. That's what we have in common, and that is okay. There is nothing wrong with it. The key is you should know what your fears are, okay? And then we got to figure out a way, how do we overcome those fears? So I'm actually reading a few things. Being alone. So that's coming up a lot. A lot of you are mentioning being alone is something that you fear. I share that as well, right? So write those down on a piece of paper. I hope you're writing those down besides sharing those here with me, which is really good. The next question is, what are some of your superpowers, some of your strengths, your talents, your skills, or things you're really good at? Okay? So write these down on a piece of paper and then start sharing them also with me on the chat so I can read up some of those, and I'll share some of mine with you. So just keep in mind, there's a little bit of a delay, 10 to 15 seconds before I see your responses. But write down your superpowers, talents, things you're really good at, things you consider are really special to you. So write these down and share them on the chat so I can share with everybody. Okay, somebody said sketching. Cool. That's one of my superpowers. What else? What are some of the other awesome powers you have? Art. Okay, I have that as well. Good. What else? What else is your... Okay. Getting off my test. Sports. Somebody said sports. Cool. Good. Okay. I'm sure. Climbing. Okay. Playing the piano. Okay. Very good. So we have musicians here. Flexibility. Cool. Yeah. Sports. We have, okay. So we got a few sports. Drawing. So we have a lot of artists. People who love artists. Cool. I do that too. Skating. Okay. I don't know how to skate, but that's cool. Writing and making books. That's very good. I like to do that. Cooking. I have gotten better over time. I didn't know how to cook. Video games, okay, very cool. Hardworking, good. That's a great skill to have. Football, okay. Legos, I love Legos as well, so that's cool. Crocheting, okay. Piano, gymnastics. So we have a lot of sporty and artsy folks. Okay, drawing, very cool. Playing recorder, very cool. Builder, so you like to build things, very cool. Running. So we have a lot of video games. So we have a lot of sporty, creative, we have swimming coming in, math. So we have like writing, math, Legos. So a lot of these things actually have a lot in common, right? We're talking about creative things you do with your hands, things you do with your brain, your heart and your hand, your full body, mind and heart, everything you're mentioning here. There's a lot of Lego loving folks here. Running, very cool. Okay, so let me share some of mine with you. I love Legos. I love reading, as you can tell by my library. But interestingly, I did not grow up in a house where we had books. I didn't read books until I went to college. So that is something I want you to keep in mind. You can pick up superpowers over time. You might not be born with certain skills, but over time, if you practice, if you put hard work in, you can acquire superpowers. So that's a very important lesson to know, that you can pick up superpowers and you don't have to be young. You could be 80 years young and you can pick up superpowers. So I want to mention one example before we go into the interactive piece of this workshop. A lot of you know of Vishavjit Singh, right? The runner, the marathon runner. He lives in the UK, in London. And he started running in his 80s. Like he was 84, 85 years young. And he started running then. And he got really good at it. And he started breaking world records. And he is still alive. He's 108 or 109 years old and he still runs. So imagine this. He picked up the superpower in his 80s. So very important to keep in mind. You have superpowers today and you can pick up new superpowers. All right. So this is what I want you to do now. Thank you for writing these down. Thank you for sharing them with me. And what I'm noticing is a lot of you already have a lot of these in common with each other. Tons of things common with each other and with myself, which is good, which is one thing I want you to keep in mind. When we look at people, sometimes we see people, we think, okay, you look different. You speak differently. Maybe you speak a different language. Maybe you're from somewhere else. But beyond our looks, beyond the languages we speak, we have a lot in common, okay? And those things we have in common are usually our strengths and our weaknesses. So things that you just mentioned, a lot of people around the globe share that with you, okay? So we're going to move into the interactive piece now. What I want you to do is, everybody has the pieces of paper ready, okay? Have your markers, pencils, pens ready. I want you to have blue and red ready, okay? Or you can do it with a pencil too, but then make sure you color it in. And what I want you to do is, I want you to sketch Captain America's shield, and I'm going to show you 3 examples that I did where we're going to incorporate our strengths and our weaknesses in that shield, okay? So the first one I'm going to share is, I did this on the computer and I printed it actually a little while ago. So I'm going to read this to you. Some of my superpowers: reading, writing, kindness, art, patience. But then some of my fears and weaknesses are people calling me names, bad names, losing loved ones, failing at things. That could be an exam or a job or doing things. So that's one example. All right. I'm going to show you another example. So this is kind of like zooming in. You can change the shape of a shield. You don't have to draw a circle. So this is still a circle. So another fear I have being alone, people being mean to me. But then some of my superpowers are storytelling. So I love telling stories, drawing, staying quiet. So you might not think of staying quiet as a superpower, but staying quiet actually is a superpower. It's a type of meditation. Because when you're quiet, you can observe things. You can see what's happening. You can hear things. You can see things. So a very important superpower. I also like to dream a lot in the daytime. Like I think in my head, I dream in my head. That's a superpower. And I want to show you one last example before we start sketching. So what I did is I took the star and one red circle. But then you notice what I did at the end? I kind of created these rectangles or triangles, I should say. And you can do anything. The rule here is use red, white, and blue, use a star, and then do something with it. Create your own shield. But the key is, important thing is, I want you to write your superpowers and your weaknesses in this shield. All right? So while you do this, I'm going to sketch as well. I'm going to put my camera on my sketching pad on a piece of paper. So while you sketch, I'm going to sketch as well. All right? So I'm going to move my camera a little bit. So you're going to see the camera move a little bit. And then you're going to see my piece of paper. So I'm going to change my orientation here. All right. Here we go. All right, everyone. So here's my piece of paper. You see my pens. You can certainly use crayons, right? That's totally up to you. You can use a pencil and color on it later on. So what I'm going to do is I want you to start doing this while I'm doing this, right? So maybe first we create a star, right? So I'm going to sketch a star. Okay? And you can change the shape of the star here. You don't have to have totally straight lines. Okay, so that's my star. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a red circle around it. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to write my fears in a circle. You don't have to do this. You can really do it anyway. Like I gave you examples, red, white, and blue. Let's draw a star. And then whatever shape you want to draw, you incorporate those words in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write my fears. So being alone is one. Failing is one. People being mean is another one. Getting sick, S-I-C-K, is another one. And what's another fear of mine? Well, I didn't talk about this earlier, but I'm going to mention this right now. I've always been skinny all my life. And when I was a young boy, a lot of people, strangers and even friends and family members, they used to say things to me that were not very nice. Because just because I was skinny, they thought something was wrong with me, which is not true. So I have had body image issues. I've tried to change myself so I look different. And it took me a long time to realize you don't need to change yourself just because people think there is something wrong with you. Okay? You need to know what your weaknesses are, and then you work on them. You don't let people convince you there is something wrong with you just because you look a certain way, you talk a certain way, right? We all are unique. We all have our own unique superpowers. And we also share superpowers with people, but we're all unique. So I want you to keep that in mind. That's a very important quality to have as a superhero, to be comfortable in your skin, to know that you are good enough as you are, and you can become better. But keep in mind, you are cool the way you are, and you can get better. Okay, so I've sort of drawn this circle around, right? And I can actually color it in, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm going to make this red. Yeah. And I'm actually now going to sketch over these words. Okay, so that's my first part of my shield. And I hope all of you are sketching, because what I'm going to do is once we're done, I'm going to ask you all to take a photo of these drawings, and I want you to share these on social media feeds and tag me and Sikh Coalition on, so I can see all of your drawings. And I would love to share them. Let me know if I can share them. I'll try to make a collage out of them, and I'll try to share them also. And one of the things, you might wonder, what keeps me inspired and creative? It's actually doing this, what I'm doing right now. I love hosting workshops like this, and I love looking at other people's art and ideas. And that keeps me motivated and inspired. So I'd love to see your art. Okay, so here's my first part of the shield. Yeah. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw another circle around it. So that's part of my outer shield. Yep. And then I'm going to make one other circle. Okay. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, inside the outer circle, I'm going to actually put my superpowers, right? So I love to draw. I like to do storytelling. That's one of my superpowers. And I like to be silent for long periods of time so I can get ideas. How I get my ideas a lot of times to do creative work is I go silent. I don't try to talk, not listen to anything, just stay in my head. So silence is pretty powerful. What else so I said, reading. I love reading. Books are amazing. That's one of my superpowers. And actually, I have gotten very good over the years cooking. I love cooking now. So that's one of my superpowers. So that's kind of like my shield. I have my fears in the middle, in the inside, and then I have my superpowers, right? So we're around 2:32, so we should be finishing up right now. So if you can start kind of, make sure you have your superpowers, your fears all incorporated in, that would be really good, because then I can wrap up and, share some final wisdom and thoughts with you. But keep in mind, as you wrap up, I would love for you to share this art with us, okay? So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to actually leave my coloring to later on, but I hope you are coloring while I go switch over back to my... All right, cool. So everybody sees me now back in my library, I hope. And I want to share some final thoughts with you here, right? So one of the things that I want you to keep in mind is superheroes in comic books and in real life, they all have weaknesses and they also have superpowers and strengths. And we all have a superhero inside us that has the same things, fears, and most importantly, we have superpowers, things that make us cool, things that allows us to manage our fears, right? So what we did today is something I want you to do periodically over time, again and again. You need to be aware of what your fears are at all times. You should know, even when you grow up, you'll have fears, but they'll change. And when you grow up, you will have new superpowers. So you should know what the superpowers are, and then you can share those superpowers with other people, right? So that's a very important part. A lot of you mentioned in the beginning, what do superheroes do? You help people out, right? You are kind. right? You share things with people. So right now we're stuck at home, a lot of us. So what can we do for other people? We can donate money, we can donate our time, we can donate food, right? We can see if our neighbors need help. We can certainly say thank you to a lot of people, but even more importantly than thank you is doing things and sharing things. All right? So I want to close this session now, but before we do that, I want to open up for if there are any questions or comments or any wisdom you want to share from this workshop. So remember, there's a little lag time. It might take a few seconds, but are there any questions you have for me or any comments? So we have, just like I said, we have a little bit of a lag time. So we have somebody saying hello. So any questions or comments? Okay, what I want to do is, while I wait for some of your questions and comments, okay, so somebody said, you like the message you've heard. That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to share. Okay, somebody asked me this question. How did you become a superhero? So, good question. I don't consider myself. I didn't consider ever myself a superhero. It took me a long time to realize we all have the superhero inside us. There's a lot of, after people were mean to me for a long time, I realized eventually, okay, I need to find my superpowers, right? So I started sketching a lot, I started writing a lot, I started reading a lot, and then I realized, hey, I have superpowers. And so what I can do is, I can introduce myself and share my story through art. And that's what I do. So I travel across the US a lot. I go to schools and companies, and I share my story with people. And then people start sharing their stories with me. So when I started going to schools and started sharing stories, that's when I realized, you know what, there's a little superhero inside me, just like everybody else. So that's the first time when I was like 30, 35 years old, that's when I first realized, hey, you know what, we all have superheroes inside us. So great question. But keep in mind, all of you are superheroes. Sometimes no. And just because I'm wearing this uniform does not make me a superhero. You have to do things to become a superhero, right? So that's very important. Action, right? Helping people. All right, so somebody asked me, this will be the last, since we're running out of time, I'm going to ask this really good question. How did you go through all the hard fears and obstacles? Great question. So and then the related question, how did I deal with bullies in school? It took me a long time. And bullies in school, hardships in school, I had to go to college. I had to be in my 20s. I started reading books, and through books, I realized there are characters who are like me in life, but I only found them through books. So through books, I realized one of the best ways to get to know people and for people to know who you are is to tell them your story. So people see me, they think I have a turban, I have a beard, and they think they know who I am and where I'm from. Well, they don't know, right? How do you know that I'm from New York City, right? Unless I tell you. How do you know I was born in Washington, D.C.? You don't. You have to know my story. So one of the most important things I want to share with you, the last very important message, you do not know anyone until you know what their story is, okay? And the only person who knows your story better than anybody else is you. So even your parents, even your sister and brother and friends and uncles and aunties, they don't know your story as well as you do. Because you know what's in your head. You know what you're thinking at all times. So the most important way to overcome your fears and bullies and things is to tell your story honestly. Don't hide your fears. Don't run away from your fears. That is okay. Every superhero has fears. Write them, talk about them, but also remember you have superpowers. So how do you overcome fears? Honestly, embrace your fears. And then, as I said earlier, you can pick up superpowers all your life. You need to work hard. You need to be honest. You need to be sharing and caring, being kind. It's not easy sometimes to be kind and sharing, but those are beautiful qualities that almost every cool superhero has. So on that note, thank you very much for joining today. We are out of time. And what I want to do is I want to share a couple of things with you. So as part of my work as Captain America, I want to share a couple of messages with you. There's a short film that got broadcast on PBS, which is a cable news network, in the beginning of the month. And right now, only for the month of May, which is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, celebrating Asian Americans and our history, there's a film that's on YouTube. It's called Drawn Together. It's by a director called Harleen Kaur in San Francisco Bay Area, California. And you can go to YouTube. You can just search for Drawn Together Harleen Kaur or Harleen Singh. And the film, the production is Kaur Films. And you can actually find that pretty easily. So this is available only through the end of May. So anybody can see this through the end of May around the globe, about 50 minutes long. So please make sure you watch this film. One important message. I would love to see your art. So please take a photo and share your shield, your art, on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Make sure you use my handle, which is SickToons, SiKHTOONS, and Sick Coalition handle, so we know whose art it is. And then my hope is I can share some of those in my social media feeds as well. One last thing I want to share with you. I want to share this message for next week. Okay? So thank you for joining Sick Coalition's Kids Corner. Please join us same time next week, Wednesday. Okay? And Neelamjit Tillo, a multi-instrumentalist performer, so she does music with a lot of different instruments, composer, will be sharing his various musical talents with us. So share this awesome opportunity with friends and classmates who would be interested in joining next week, same time. And for a weekly reminder for this session, make sure to sign up at Kids Corner Content. It's on Sick Coalition, okay? Or text Sick Kids Corner at 52886 from your phone. So that number again, 52886. So you can text Sick Kids Corner and you can join next week, Neelamjit Tillo. Thank you very much again. It's been a joy. I look forward to seeing your art, okay? Remember to share it, tag me, SickToons, and Sick Coalition. Thank you very much. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and stay safe, well, and kind.